We are recording office hours on October 20th. So the question is about question 2 on the homework. It's useful to think about question 1 in terms of setting things up. So question 1 in the homework, there's a pattern to the homework. There's an intentional pattern to the homework. That question 1 is a very specific question that has specific equations and specific numbers for the interest rate, for the level of investment, the level of saving. And then once we understand this in a specific case, where we can actually put the numbers there, then what we want to do is move to a more conceptual thing, right? Because conceptually is what we want to do. So number 2 expands that out to a conceptual idea. So what's the conceptual model here? What's the economic model? What's the graphical model? All right. So there are 2 countries, right? This is the thing. This is the thing that the thing that's different from. Whoops, that's not what I want. I've said countries, but that's not what I want to put down. This is what's different than the beginning of the semester or any other point in the semester. We've always just focused on the domestic economy, right? It's just the US, ignoring the rest of the world. So this is like home and the rest of the world. So this is a gross simplification of the world economy. But that's what models are about. It's a simplification. Now, I'm going to draw. So what we're talking about here is the goods market. All right. So desired saving, desired investment, and the real interest rate. So I'm going to draw. So we need to get the axes first of all. We need to label those. Critical. I'm going to draw these curves in a very specific way. The graphs in a very specific way. We don't have to, but I'm going to do it to be representative of what actually is true if home is the US. So I'm going to draw the curves in this case where the equilibrium real interest rate is going to be relatively high. In the foreign, so this is desired investment, this is desired saving. And I'm going to draw over in the foreign so that the lines cross there at a lower interest rate, right? So it's the real interest rate on the vertical axis. So we can literally go across, we can work our way across both graphs. We're going to ultimately do that. All right, so we can compare horizontally across the graphs. So this might be 5%, this might be 2%. Now, I'm only saying that to get, I want the interest rate to be lower over in the foreign, interest rate to be higher in the home. And we're going to see why that is in a moment. It doesn't have to be that way. You could draw them different ways, but I'm intentionally doing that. You'll see why. So there's a level of investment and saving in equilibrium in each country if what's true. This goes back to my email to you today, Brittany. Those are the equilibrium levels in each country if what is true.
Let me pull up your email.
So we could look at each one of these individually. And that was chapter 4 in our text. The goods market. Right? We just had the US. But we could have, if we were taking this class in Japan, we could have used the goods market in Japan, right? Foreign. Right? So those interest rates, these equilibria, I'm not even labeling them with the letter because that's not where we're starting here. Those would be the equilibrium
Without
interest
trade.
and investment and saving without what?
Without trade.
Without trade. That's exactly right. So if they were closed economies, no trade with each other, that would be the case.
And then the midpoint between them is the world equilibrium.
Right.
Okay.
So that's a critical point. I'm making a little smaller pen point here for what I'm about to do. So the question is, one way to think about this, I don't remember whether I do it this way in the demonstration video or not. You can tell me, I don't remember right now. In thinking about, well, why can't the world equilibrium rate be 2%? Or why can't the equilibrium real world interest rate be, I'm drawing this all the way across, 5%? Right, so here's the 5%. Here's the 2%. Why does it have to? So here's one of the questions, right? And it literally is one of the questions on the homework, 1C. Right? Why is that? Why does the equilibrium world interest rate have to be between the equilibrium real interest rate that would occur in each country without trade? Why is that? Like, that's a legit exam question, just by itself, even. That's why it's on the homework. So could it be below 2%?
Is the answer you're looking for like 1C, is it because the distance between investment and savings are the same on both home and foreign
But
at the higher interest rate and at the lower interest rate?
but opposite, right?
But opposite, yes.
Yes, that's so. That is a thing that you can memorize, right? I mean, literally, that's a thing you can memorize, right? That is a tool. So memorization is okay up to a point. And now you need to use that to get to, well, the why part. Like, why? Why is that? Why? Right? That's what you said is absolutely correct, right? But that might not even be a C answer. But no, I'm not kidding about that.
No, I know, I'm looking for a B.
if I'm asking for the why, right? But it doesn't mean it's a bad answer. It means that's a starting point. That's a really useful starting point. And so why can't so I'm doing this as much for Faith, who wasn't there on Tuesday. So if this is 2%, right? This is the line that goes all the way across. So why can't it be I don't know, 1.5%? What's true at 1.5%? Well, 1.5% desired saving in the US is this much, right? Right. Desired investment, well, let's just call it 1, is there, right? Over here, oops, I didn't label those, did I? That's not good. Oh, come on, don't do that. Do that. It's because my hand is resting on there. All right. So right, so the same curves over there. Desired investment over here is there. Desired saving in the foreign country is there, right? All right, now I'm gonna move this up a little bit. What does equilibrium mean in the open economy?
Equilibrium, if I'm not mistaken, is when everything, or when marginal cost equals marginal benefit. And so
Yes.
they're allocating, allocating, don't tell me, allocating labor and resources efficiently.
That's a general,
At the market.
it's a general notion of equilibrium. What does equilibrium mean in the goods market? What does it mean? What does it mean in these graphs? So what would equilibrium, so if this was a closed economy and we just had the US, just the graph on the left, right? Where would equilibrium, where does equilibrium happen?
Where they cross.
And what does that mean, where they cross? That's correct. That's
Where
correct.
Is it profit maximization?
No, just look at the graph.
You're saying when the savings and investment equal the same amount.
There you go. There you go. The saving equals investment. Same thing in the foreign country, right? By itself, the equilibrium is where saving equals investment, right? No surplus, no shortage, right? That's what it means. But what does it mean in the world economy? It's the same thing. It means that saving in the world has to be equal to desired investment in the world. But saving in the world is saving at home plus saving foreign, right? Those are only two we have here. That's investment in the home plus investment in the foreign country, right? Yeah, we're good?
I'm good, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Right? I mean, this is the same. This is the total amount of saving in the world. So what does saving get used for? It gets used for financing investment in new capital. That's what banks do. Like banks take in savings and they loan it out. They borrow to borrowers. That's the way to think about this. Right? That's what we're talking about here. Right? So now, if I just want to think about, what does this mean in each country, then I want to bring home and foreign on the same sides, right? So I want to bring foreign over here. I'm going to bring the home over here, right? So I'm going to subtract IH from each side. So then I have SH minus investment in the home equals what? Investment in the foreign minus saving in the foreign, right? So if saving is greater than investment in a country, that means there's a surplus of saving in that country. There's more saving than firms want to borrow for investment, right? That's what that means. If that's a positive number, the difference between those two. If this is like 100, this is like 80, let's say, right? There's more saving than desired investment. Desired investment means desired borrowing, right? Where does the borrowing come from? Saving, right? The saving in the country, right? So now we can say this is like minus saving in the foreign minus investment in the foreign. Like I just brought a minus sign. I just flipped them around, right? All right, so what does this mean over here? If this is 20 over here, there's an equal sign here. This has got to be 20, which means that investment is greater than saving by 20 in the foreign country. There's excess demand for borrowing for new capital in the foreign country. They don't have enough saving to finance all the investment that firms want to do in new capital. New business, new factories, new machines, etc. Where do they get it from? They get it from the other country. If those two aren't equal, then saving in the world is not equal to investment in the world. All right, hold on a minute. Somebody maybe here. Hello? Oh. Yeah, you're good. No, shut that. Yeah. So all of this comes from this equilibrium condition, right? So now what is saving minus investment. Well, we know back from chapter 2, but also in this chapter, chapter 5, right, it comes back again. We know that saving equals I plus CA, right? So S minus I, right, if we bring I to the other side, equals CA. Well, here's S minus I. So that's the current account in the home country. So this is the current account in the foreign country. The minus sign there. So equilibrium means this has to be true. So what does this distance between at any given interest rate, what does that distance represent? It represents the difference between investment and saving, right? It's the current account or negative the current account, right? So remember the current account in one country, that distance has to be what. So now I'm going to go back, Brittany, to what you said to begin with, right? Which is what I've written here is the theory part. It's not even theory. It's just, well, it's a theory. It's the equilibrium condition. That's what's behind that, right? It's translating what you just said into the economics. What you said is what's in red down below here, all right? So why can't 1.5% be the world equilibrium? Because like both countries have a current account deficit. They're negative, right? I is bigger than S in both countries. And that can't be. One's got to be positive, one's got to be negative. One's got to be the other opposite of the other one. That's the point. That can't. So in that case, in the world, the total amount of investment in the world, desired investment, is way bigger than the total amount of desired saving. That's not true. So it's not an equilibrium. What's going to happen? Well, there's way more investment, way more demand for borrowing than there is supply of borrowed funds or lendable funds. So what happens? There's a shortage. There's a shortage of saving, right? There's a shortage of anything, price goes up. Interest rate is the price in this market. Interest rate's going to go up. Is it going to stop at 2%? No, because 2%, right? The current account is 0 over here, right? S equals I, right? There's no trade deficit, right? That's what that current account means, right? But over here, all right, saving is still less than investment by that much. There's a shortage of saving in the world. There's not enough saving. There's enough saving in the foreign country at 2% to satisfy the desired investment in the foreign country, but there's not enough in the home country. So overall, in the whole world economy, investment is still greater than saving. What's going to happen? Interest rates are going to keep going up. When do they stop going up? When the difference between these two lines is exactly the same. Maybe we have to eyeball this. Maybe about right there, right? We're looking at this distance. We're talking about this distance and this distance, right? What we're saying is that this distance AB, it's got to be equal to distance CD, right? That's CD, then this is AB, right? Equilibrium means that distance has to be equal to that distance. That is the equilibrium world real interest rate. Right? So that's just to get us to the starting gate. But I needed to explain the why part, right? It can't be 5% because in that case, in the US, 5%, the saving and investment are equal, right? They're the same, right? Savings minus investment is 0, but over in the other country, right, the rest of the world, the amount of saving, right, come down all the way down, is bigger than the amount of investment. There's a surplus of saving in that country and in the world economy, and so interest rates are going to go down. Where do they stop? Right where our star is, right? So that, whoops. is the equilibrium world interest rate. That's what equilibrium means in the open economy, right? In the goods market. So now the question number 2 says, right? So why did I draw? So now we can go back. Why did I draw this with the higher interest rate in the US versus in the foreign country? Any ideas why that is? Here's equilibrium. So here's the level of investment in equilibrium in the world, but in the home country, sorry. Here's the level of, oops, home country, H, sorry. There's called I star and H, S star, right? There and there. So what's true about this, in this equilibrium, what's true in the US? What does it mean when I is bigger than S? I bigger than S.
Are you talking about like in general or like the shifts and things like that?
I haven't talked about any shifts yet. I'm getting there. I'm going to do that next. Making sure we understand the basic ideas first. 80 minus 100 is what? I just pick numbers. It could be 40 minus 60, 10 minus 60.
It's a negative number. So the
Negative number, negative 20. So what does that number represent? It represents the current account. Current account is negative. What's the current account? Net exports. It's net exports plus net factor payments. We assume net factor payments are just a small part. So we can assume that that's net export. What is that? That's our trade debt. That's our trade surplus or deficit. These are all ways of saying the same thing, right? CA, NX, trade surplus, they're all the same thing. They're all just, in fact, we could also say that's minus the financial account, right? That's another way of saying it. That's the first part of chapter 5, right? We can, all these things mean the same thing. So what does it mean if what does it mean if the net exports are negative? Well, what are net exports? Net exports are exports minus imports, right? And if this is minus 20, what does that mean? That means that imports are bigger than exports, right? Because there's a minus sign here. Like this could be minus, this could be 30 and this could be 10, right? So we have a trade what?
question. What about, I thought, what is it called? For the homework, I saw that like services of exports and services of imports, are
Yep.
those factored into
Yep.
the export? Okay.
Yep. Exports and imports broken down into goods and services. Yep. So could be somebody coming to college in the US or going to college abroad. That's a service, right? Law services, accounting services, any kind of services like that. Or it could be goods, it could be, washing machines, it could be iPods, it could be whatever, right? Cars. Yep. So it's not trading, it's not borrowing and lending. That's the financial account, which is the other side of the current account. The current account plus the financial account has to equal 0. Current account equals minus the financial account. Financial account measures flows of dollars for purchases of financial, not services, financial securities, right? Stocks, bonds, etc. Real estate. So assets. It's a sale of assets, purchase and sale of assets, right? The way to think about that is that this is an aside right now. I'm going to come back to, I need to finish this off, right? Is that the if we buy, so what's happening in this, so why did, the question is, why did I set it up so this is higher than this one? Because I knew that if the equilibrium world interest rate has to be between the interest rate that would happen in the home country and the foreign country if they were separate countries. Right, this is kind of review now what we did, but I know that, right, because I practiced, I've done this, I've drawn it enough times, I've done enough of these problems, right? And you should get to that point, right, where I know that. So if I want the home country to show a trade deficit, I know that I has to be bigger than S. And if the interest rate is going to be between those two, in this case 2% and 5%, then I need to draw so that the equilibrium in the home country is higher, right? Because that's going to I'm going to end up with a trade deficit then. Why did I do that? Because we actually do have a trade deficit in the United States. That's a realistic deal. That's the point. That's the reason. I don't have, if I didn't give you that information, and so I could give you that information, like start your problem with the home country showing a trade deficit. And you would need to make sure you understood what that means and draw that accordingly. All right. This happens to be that. That's not where we started with this. I drew it in that way, and we got to that point down here, and to say, oh, whoa, that's not what we want to say. What? I'm sorry. We wanted to say that, right? Now we're working our way back, right? So if investment is bigger than saving, current account's negative. What's the current account? That's net exports. Net exports are what? Exports minus imports. And if that's negative, then that means imports are bigger than exports. Trade deficit. Okay, that's the logic. That's the logic flow that you work through. All right. And you only have to do this a couple times. You do it a couple times and you get it. And like, oh yeah, okay, I see that now. I get it. Right? Kind of like checking your answer in the spreadsheet on question number 1. And you say, oh yeah, okay, I got it. I can see it. What's this question asking? Because we haven't actually answered the question at all. This is actually just the starting point. And I'm going through it in excruciating detail so you understand the process, because once you understand the process, the actual question is simple. It's not hard, right? Or it's straightforward. Let's put it that way. So let's go back to the question. Question says, deficit rose even though tariffs were being imposed. Commentator says, oh, that's because of the tax policies that were in place. Right? This is actually during the Trump administration. Right? And this is a true thing. Right? This has really happened. There were tax cuts for businesses and individuals. Those were likely to blame. That's another way of saying that's the cause. Right? So that's the starting point. So, is that consistent with the theory? So, if we cut taxes, what's going to happen? Now we're just back to the same question. Which market, which curve, which way, what happens? What's a new equilibrium? We did this, now we're back in chapter 4. No, nothing different than chapter 4 at this point. We'll come back and it will be different, but at this point, now we're back to chapter 4. If you cut taxes, does it affect saving? Or you only have 2 choices, right? We know what market we're in. We're in the home country. Nothing's happening in the foreign country. The question's about in the US. So we know we're in this graph, first of all. All right. Now, you cut taxes. Is that about investment or is that about saving? In other words, which curve?
Savings.
Savings, right? Because savings is saving by the government plus saving by the by the private sector, right? Private saving plus government saving. Now we can go back to chapter 2. What's government saving? Government saving has to do with taxes, tax revenues coming in, and government spending going out. Right? Cut taxes, less tax revenue coming in, and what's going to happen to government saving? Reduce taxes. You're the government, you're going to reduce taxes. What happens to your revenue?
Decreases.
decreases. So if you decrease revenue, if you don't have as much income coming into your house, what's going to happen? You're going to run a deficit, right? You're going to spend more than your income, probably, right? If your spending doesn't change, and there's no change in spending here, right? And there wasn't any change in spending here, right? So we have to translate that news article piece into let's use green, right? That's a leftward shift in the saving curve, right? Boom. Now, if we were back in chapter 4, we just go from this point to that point. Boom. Easy, easy peasy. Where's the new equilibrium in the world going to be? Well, we got to go through that same process we just did before, right? We got to find the equilibrium, find it. So is R star still the equilibrium? First question. Can that be and so why not?
Because we've made a shift, so it's different.
Yes, that's not going to get you a lot of points on that one. Just saying that. That's right, but that's
Sorry,
correct.
I was writing. Sorry.
No, I know. I'm just messing with you. I'm just messing with you. No, I'm teasing. Okay. So it's back here, right? It's S. No, I don't know. Put two asterisks there, right? Now saving is back there at the current interest rate. Saving is back here. So the difference between the curves is now, if I could get it not to erase, that would be good, right? Is now, right? This distance, right? Has anything happened over in the foreign country? No. So now this is like, I don't know, let's call it A prime, right? So the distance over here is A prime to B, right? A prime B, right? Is that equal to CD? No, it's bigger, right? This line right here is bigger than this distance now, right?
Yes.
I mean, that makes sense, right? The saving went down, right? So now there's not, before we were in equilibrium, now savings gone down. So there's a shortage of saving in the world economy. What's going to happen to the interest rate? If there's a shortage of anything, what's going to happen to the
Our
price?
interest rate is going to rise.
Yeah, because people want to borrow money for investment in new capital, but there's not enough saving around for it. So some people are going to get shut out, and they're willing to offer a higher interest rate to get the money for the investment. So in that case, interest rate's going to go up. When is it going to stop? When's the interest rate going to stop going up? When the difference between the green line, right, this line, and this one, which hasn't changed, right?
Right.
Is equal to the is equal but opposite to the, right, the
foreign
difference over here, right, in the foreign country. So so it's as if this blue line right here, it's as if that one's gone. It's like, I mean, if I was just erasing here, I could erase that, right? So I'm going to end up erasing too much of it, because the way I have my eraser set up will take out too much of things. So when is that going to happen? It's going to happen. Oh, I've got to eyeball that. Maybe it's about right. Maybe it's about right here. Maybe. All right. So we're saying that this distance right here and this to here, right, is equal to, well, maybe I didn't get that quite right. And maybe I overshot it a little bit, right? Is equal to that distance. That's not quite right. I didn't do that quite. So
I understand the theory, though. Yes.
It didn't go up quite that high. But so now we say, well, what happened? So that's the new equilibrium, R star 1 world, right? It's higher, right? The real world interest rate's gone up. What's happened to the total quantity of saving in the US? It's now here, right?
Yes.
Right? It used to be here. So what's happened? It's lower, right? What's happened? Yeah, that's right. And what's happened to investment in equilibrium?
It's also decreased.
It's also lower, right? Over here, what's happened in the other country? Higher interest rate. It's gone the other saving has, whoops, sorry, investment. Oh, I had those labeled wrong. Wow. Right, that's actually off the investment curve. Right. No, I did have it labeled correctly to begin with. Sorry, I see.
So-
And the amount of saving has
Decrease.
gone up, right?
Yes, so
So actually, sorry, the amount of investment has gone down.
that's what I was about to ask you. I was like,
Yeah, no, that's why I got myself mixed up there. I knew that's where I had a feeling that's where you were going. That's good. That's good that I knew that and that was correct. But that makes sense, right? Higher interest rates. Like, so this foreign country hasn't done anything. They're at the mercy of what happens in the US, right? They're facing higher world interest rates, and because the US is a large open economy, right? If we were a small open economy, that's actually the first part of the chapter, but we're going to really focus on the large open economy part. And because we affect the world interest rate. So at higher interest rates, yeah, there's not going to be as much investment in new capital. It's more expensive to borrow, right?
right.
So, and it's going to be more, people are going to save more because now the return on savings that they get is higher. So, yeah. Does that make, so the question is, but now we're kind of taking a helicopter view is what I'm saying. Does that make sense? So what happens in the home country? Well, we know that savings gone down, investments gone down, and what's happened to the trade deficit? Right? The trade deficit is this difference right here, right?
Yes.
And it used to be there. So the picture isn't really drawn exact. Well, sorry. It used to be here. It used to be this between A and B. Sorry, it used to be AB, right? And now it's this.
So the trade deficit has increased.
Right. And how do you know that? Because over here, this is bigger, right?
Yes.
And it's just the opposite. So even if you don't get your graph exactly right, you can get it from the foreign country. So so in that case, so now let's go back to the question. Remember, the question says, like, well, the commentator said that the president's tax policies were the reason that we're to blame for the trade deficit increasing, even though we put higher taxes on imported goods to try and reduce the trade deficit. Is the model consistent with that? Yes. That's what we just found out, right?
Right.
And so in the book, there is this section, and I've got to go. We do have to quit. I have a hard stop at 4, so we're good yet. But right and this is part of the question. But in the textbook, in this chapter, there's this little, feature, right, talking about the idea of twin deficits. It's the government budget deficit and trade deficit. So in this case, what happened? Trade deficit went up. Sorry, budget deficit went up. Trade deficit went up, right?
Yes.
So if we go back up here to the uses of saving identity, all right? What happened is when there's a budget deficit, what happens to national saving? Goes down, right? Which is the same as an increase in the budget deficit, right? Reduction in national saving, increase in the deficit. So there's an equal sign here. What did we just see in this graph? I went down and CA went down. Trade deficit, right? That's a negative number. The trade deficit got more negative, right? The current account went down. Now we have the theory, the model that goes back to prove the uses of saving identity, which didn't have any economics really in it. It was just measuring, right? Chapter 2 is about measuring the economy. But once we got that uses of saving identity, remember I said, like, we're going to come back to that and use that over and over again.
Yes.
And it's a really useful thing. And so now we have the actual theory to put on those bones.
Okay. I have one quick question for you before we hit 4 o'clock. Question 1, part D, where the desired savings falls.
Mhm.
For that, am I literally just looking at my level of savings that I calculated in part A, subtracting 1? Like,
No, you're going to the equation. Right? This equation, saving equals 1 plus 0.5R.
yes.
So for every R, what we're saying is saving is 1 less. Right?
So
It's a
is my
leftward, which is the same thing as saying a leftward shift in the saving curve.
so is my equation changing?
Yes.
So my
You
starting
can, so
equation.
you can plot that to convince yourself of that, is what I'm saying. Right? So if R was 0, I mean, this is what you need to do. You just need to do these sort of simple checks. So in that case, if R was 0, I have it over here. That's why I'm looking over here. It's on I actually have it on my laptop over here. All right. So if R was 0, saving is 1, right?
Yes.
So if it was 1 less, it would be what?
-1.
No, it'd be 0.
Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one.
Right. If R was 1, then according to the equation, the original equation that's there, it would be S would be at 1.5.
Correct.
Now
So
it's
1
gonna
less
be-
would be 0.5.
right. And now work that through and figure out, well, what is that? Now, what's the pattern that I'm seeing with that? You could do 2 and 3 and 4, right? R equals 2, 3, 4. What's the new equation going to be?
Okay.
1 less, right? It's just going to be 0.5R, right?
Yes. Because instead of 1 plus
I
0.5
mean,
R.
literally, 1 less means you're subtracting 1 off of saving for every R, right?
Okay, so I
So
just
if
create a
those-
new equation.
So if you do saving H minus 1 and take that both, and you have to do it on both sides, 1 minus 1 is 0, right? And so saving becomes 0.5R then in that case, right?
And
You
then
can
I'd
prove
work
that.
the
You can,
equation for R.
you can
Yeah.
prove that to yourself. Just graph those 2 equations. Like you can do this in 5 minutes, no, 2 minutes. Just do R, make a little table. R equals 0, 1, 2, 3. Graph it when it's this equation and graph it when it's 1 less. If it's just, and to convince yourself that that's a leftward shift in the saving curve.
Okay. And then
It's useful to do that. I mean, literally just to do real simple things like that to convince yourself of that. Like, oh, I can figure that out. Like I can figure out what that equation would be.
so once I rework that equation, I'm literally just doing step A over again.
100%, 100% on that.
Okay.
Yes,
Cool.
yes, yes. It's extra practice. That's correct.
Because
And what are you going to find? And given what we just did with number 2, what are you going to find out?
What do
Like,
you mean?
isn't that what we just did here?
Yes.
Yes.
So by the time I rework number 1, I should be great when we get to number 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or now that you know essentially how number 2 goes, you better find out that when you actually find the numbers, that the R is bigger, saving in the home country is less, I in the home country is less, I in the foreign country is less, and S in the foreign country is more.
Okay.
That's the green lines. That's the green lines in what we just did, is what I'm saying. I just summarized what we just did with the green lines.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
In other words, this tells you what, it doesn't tell you the number, right?
Right.
It tells you what it needs to be, though, in general. So if you
Because
get
in number 2, we're not looking at numbers. We're just looking at theory.
right. So I give you that easier one in a sense, right? In other words, people like to start with numbers oftentimes and the actual concrete examples, kind of, and then build up to the conceptual. Yep. So there was a reason for constructing the homework in this way, and that is what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure I'll bombard you with questions about the review questions after I finish this.
So then what I need to do is I need to sort of come up with helicopter view, right? After you are in the weeds here, which you're going to be, you're going to be. And at that point, you should say like, oh, I understand this a lot better than when I started.
And I do, absolutely.
Exactly. But the takeaway from that partly is what I'm saying is the only way that this is part of the lesson in the homeworks as well. The only way you can get to that point is by putting in the hard work to do it. You can't read about it. You can't just read a section in a chapter. You can't just, think about it. You actually got to do it, right? So this is a perfect example of that. That if you do that and you come back to it, and why somebody who does it, say just before it's due or that night or whatever, you won't get to that same level. And so when you see a different problem later on an exam that's similar, could be very similar, but if you don't understand it conceptually, then it's going to be a lot more difficult than if you understand it conceptually, because you put in this hard work to really understand it. And it was hard to do it, right? But it pays off. And they say, oh, well, yeah, this isn't so hard. Yeah.